Hello, you wonderful people. Good evening. Welcome back to English Right Now. You're on the English Right Now course channel. There are other channels related because my name is Roy, your British English teacher. And we've got another channel called British English Teacher. Roy, if you want to check out more, even more English, you can check out my main channel. But tonight, we're going live. And the topic is very, very close to home. Quite literally, because Luciana and I, my wife and I, we are actually moving house. Ah, gosh. And if you've ever moved house in the UK or even just looked at a property listing, you will know it comes with a whole different language. And the process, well, it's quite exhausting. There is a reason I've aged 10 years in 10 days. But anyway, hello, Mabel. Welcome. Grazie la porta. I've been missing this as well. Hello, Annalise. Welcome, everybody. Farzan, a massive welcome to you. You're always welcome. And Marie-Christine, we are ready to fly. Your captain is here. We are ready to fly. But you wonderful people, tonight we're talking, as I say, about a topic really pretty close to home because we're actually moving, but there's so much vocabulary related to this subject that, to be honest, it's quite intense. So today we're going to explore British housing vocabulary and the process of moving house in the UK. First of all, as well, let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know where you're watching from, but we're going to be talking about everything from bungalows to terraced houses to mortgages to solicitors to that dreaded word, the chain. Hello, Sarah. Yay, a home from home. Well, that phrase may or may not be coming. But has anybody heard of the chain? Has anybody heard of the chain? Let me know. Let me give me an idea if you've heard of the chain. Oh, I hear this word a lot, but we're going to decode what all of these mean. We're going to also talk about the process. Oh, why am I? There we go. We're going to talk about the process, how it works in the UK, and we're going to talk about little cultural quirks that moving in Britain, it makes it so bloody delightfully complicated. So grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, no prejudice, maybe a notepad, because you're ready to become fluent in British property talk. And just so you know, this lesson, like every other live class that I do on a Thursday, will be added to the English Right Now community. Now, for those of you who don't know, the English Right Now community is part of, it's what was previously known, well, that was the previous name. It's now called the British English Lesson Library. It's a collection of every live class I've ever done. Plus, I'm actually working on some exclusive content once a month. This month's coming in November. I've decided November because life is busy enough with moving house. Will be an episode dedicated to Ode to Autumn, a poem about autumn. I thought it was quite fitting. But if you want to know more about that, so this lesson will be live, well, not live, but will be present on YouTube for 1 week, and after which it'll go down and it will be added to the British English Lesson Library. But more about that a little bit later on. So let's talk about house versus home. It is by Keats. Absolutely. Thank you. House versus home. Okay, so we got kind of two words. And home is a bit of a difficult word to translate because your house is a structure. It's a building. It's a generic word for anything made of bricks and mortar usually, where somebody may live, a dwelling, a house. So maybe you have a house in da 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 da. But home is a little bit more emotional. Home isn't just a place to live. It's kind of your identity, your investment, it's your love, your emotion. It's where you feel safe. Sometimes we don't refer to a building as home. We refer to a place as home. Oh, the Isle of Wight is home for me. It's where I feel like I belong, where I feel safe and protected. So it's much more of an emotional attachment than just house. House is a building. My house will be there long after I'm gone. But I want to stay in my home until the day that I'm gone. And there is a common English phrase. An Englishman's home is his castle. An Englishman's home is his castle. What does that mean? Well, when somebody says, hello, Grazia, when somebody says an Englishman's home is his castle, it's kind of something to be proud of. It's something that we want to protect, that we want to improve, preserve, that we want to grow our little kingdom in. And it's something much more, it's something we're very proud of. Often we talk about different cultures. Some cultures like to wear expensive clothes or buy expensive cars. Not so much for British people. We more like to spend money on homes. So for us, our major investment, you might not know by something that a person wears or the car that they drive, whether they're rich or not. But when you see their home, you're suddenly like, okay. I know I have friends who dress very kind of, very, very casually. Let's put it that way. They drive old cars that, they don't really run very well because they've always had them, but their homes are magnificent. So we take great pride in our homes. This is where the phrase "an Englishman's home is his castle." Now, because we live on quite a small island, well, technically an archipelago with limited space, the houses here are very specific. And each one kind of comes with its own social and cultural meaning. House prices in the UK are very expensive. Very expensive. So, let's talk about the different types of houses. So we have a detached house. A detached house is a house that stands on its own. It doesn't have any shared walls. So in other words, the house is a unique, separate building. It is not connected to other buildings. It doesn't have any shared walls. And it's often found in suburban or rural areas, and they are often more expensive. So somebody may say, I've just bought a lovely detached house with a lovely garden. So it's your kind of traditional idea of what a British home would be. This separate standalone house with no connecting walls, standing quite proud. That's what we call a detached house. Sometimes we call them a semi, but a semi-detached house are two houses joined together. So it's a house, and they share one wall. So while detached houses are completely separate, this would be like a semi-detached. So semi-detached are two houses joined side by side. But they're only one, two, and that's it. So quite commonly, especially Victorian regions, you get a house, and then a house together. So you get a semi-detached, a semi-detached, a semi-detached, a semi-detached. And sometimes, traditionally, people have converted a larger detached house into two semi-detached. So if the house is too big, potentially, they may sort of renovate it into two houses. And sometimes they renovate it into flats. But there's more of that coming. You can let me know what type of house you live in or what type of house is typical. So usually we have these houses that are 2 floors as well. So you have the ground floor and you have the sort of upstairs. You have upstairs and downstairs, we commonly say. Upstairs and downstairs. So many detached houses are 2 floors, semi-detached, 2 floors, and the same as well with terraced houses. So terraced houses, and sometimes we say terrace without the D, terrace houses are a long row of identical houses joined together. You have a long row of houses. You see them quite commonly in more kind of traditionally working areas, industrial areas, and they're very common in older British towns and cities. So while these kind of detached houses are quite magnificent and they stand alone, and then you have the semi-detached, which are quite large, you would have rows upon rows of houses. And they're usually kind of 2, maybe 3 bedrooms maximum. You have the downstairs, which usually has a kitchen and a living room, which contains the dining room as well. So it's a living diner. And then you go upstairs and there's maybe 1, 2 rooms and a bathroom. maybe 3 rooms, a box. Well, we'll get onto that. Traditionally, though, the bathrooms were downstairs, and at some point, we moved the bathrooms upstairs. So some of the older houses, you can still see bathrooms downstairs. We used to call them 2 up, 2 down because there were 2 rooms, 2 rooms. And Victorians were famous for building these kind of terraced houses. Now, at the end of a row of houses, there was a house and a house, and that was called the end of terraced house. End of terrace or end of terrace. It's usually end of terrace without that D. It's the same idea, but it's the end of the row, so it only shares one wall. But they're usually a little bit more expensive if they are an end of terrace. In Italy, you're very welcome, Aslam. You're very, very welcome. Grazie. In Italy, blocks of houses are very common, especially in our towns. You mean like rows of houses, or maybe we'll get on to different types of houses as well. Does anybody know what a bungalow is? What is a bungalow? There are quite a few bungalows where I live. What is a bungalow? Can anybody tell me? No, it's not a house in the country. For example, I live in a quite well, I live in a suburban area. It's a small village actually where I live. So a bungalow is a single story house. In other words, there are no stairs. So quite commonly, older people will live in bungalows because they don't want to go up the stairs or down the stairs. So they are a single story house. There you go, one floor. Absolutely. Ooh, my phone is telling me about single story houses. What my watch, sorry. Yes, they are single stories. Cottages are usually quite old. They're usually rural. They're made of stone. They often have thatched roofs, which is a roof made of kind of a plant, if you like, or straw. And they often have quite low ceilings, and they're often very, very old. And it's the traditional quaint idea of what the British live in the towns. Personally, I don't think I would love a cottage in some ways, but I think the ceilings that are quite low down, so you constantly have to stoop, would annoy me for over time. Plus, I would never want a thatched roof because they look like a lot of work. So, a country cottage, quite commonly. Sometimes we extend that to meaning without the thatch roof as well. Um, in the cities, most people or many people tend to live in flats. Flats is the British version of an apartment. Now, we do use the word apartment sometimes, but flat is basically one floor in a big building. They're quite common in the city centres in places like London. A little bit further out, you maybe get terrace houses, and further out still in the suburban areas, you maybe get some kind of um, detached or semi-detached. I lived in London in zone 433, and I was in a semi-detached property. And then I moved into closer into zone 2, and I started living in a flat. So a building of flats, note, is called a block of flats. A block of flats. They are, and there are some beautiful cottages on the Isle of Wight. They're absolutely stunning, Marie Christine. I just think they wouldn't be for me, only because of the roof. But I think they're absolutely beautiful to look at. I fall in love with them every time, but I don't think they're practical for me. I think the thatched roof, the idea of replacing a thatched roof, would be not for me. But there are some beautiful cottages. You're absolutely right. Hi, Roy. Some say that in British English, apartment would be a more luxurious or bigger flat. I have heard the term used. I think it's one of these words that's kind of creeping in, and we're trying to find a definition for it. Some people also say apartments are split levels, so they're over 2 levels, maybe. Realistically, the most common word for us would be flat still. Um, Apartment is more American, but some people do use it, yes, to kind of distinguish. Oh, they're luxury apartments. But again, you could get away with luxury flats. It's one of these words that's kind of circulating. It's circling us. but not yet fully entered. So, but I have heard more British people using it recently. But that's because of kind of influences and how do we say exposure. But I've noticed that a building of flats is called a block of flats. So, an apartment block, but we don't say a flat block because that sounds really weird. It's a block of flats. Um, you're very welcome. I mean, language is constantly living and things like that. So at the moment, I'm comfortable to teach you that flat is British and American is apartment. But if more and more people do add something to the language, then eventually we have to sort of say, yeah. Yeah, a studio flat normally has one big room with a kitchenette in it. They can be quite bleak actually. For me, I like a bit of space. So you have your bed and your living room all together. So you eat, you sleep, and you sit and watch television in a small space. They're technically meant to be cheaper, although there are some really expensive studios. I've lived in a studio flat. Not my favorite moment. Um, and yeah, they have a bathroom usually. So they have this kitchenette built into the. Yeah, it was not enough space for me. So then we have a maisonette. And this is a little bit trickier to define, but usually it's a two-level flat with its own private entrance. Although some people use it for a kind of annex as an alternative to annex, but technically it's a two-level flat with its own private entrance. And finally, a council house is housing built by local authorities. And it was originally back in the sort of back in time, it was for working class families for subsidized housing. And in fact, we tend to use the words subsidized housing now rather than council house. It's a bit of a dying phrase. But you will still, but why am I teaching it then? Because a lot of people still just call them council houses because that's how we grew up knowing them. So people say, oh, it's a council house, is it? No, it's subsidized. Oh, okay. So it's still got that same kind of the word is still used, even though it's not maybe technically accurate. So I'm teaching you what we really say rather than yeah. what we really say, which is really important. So council house is a subsidized home, usually built by or run by local authorities. And quite commonly in that, I think it was in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher allowed people to buy council houses at a cheap rate. Um, so you get a lot of places called ex-council house. So it's now a private home, but people say, yeah, it's ex-council house. It's an ex-council thing. We have new build. New build are recently constructed properties, often part of a new development. And I won't go too far into it, but usually there are buy-to-let schemes and a lot of different ways that and partial ownership and things like this, buying schemes. But new builds are a new home, brand new home, which is you're the first person to ever live in it, technically. Period properties are older houses built in a specific historical style. I'm not an architecture expert, but I'll go with these ones. Victorian houses, 1837 to 1901. That was when Victoria reigned. They usually have these quite large, sort of semicircle windows. We call them bay windows. They have fireplaces and they have very tall ceilings. They can usually be quite difficult to heat. Quite commonly, they have stone floors, but not exclusively. But those are some kind of features. Edwardian, which is 1901 to 1910, had wider halls and bigger windows. And Georgian houses, which was 1714 to 1830, there were quite a few Georges. They used to have symmetrical kind of facades and quite elegant houses. But commonly, the houses that you see realistically are 70s, 80s, 90s builds. And also, you get a lot of Victorian houses, particularly down here on the Isle of Wight. You get a lot of Victorian houses, and they tend to be quite magnificent, but they come with some problems sometimes. So if you fall in love with a Victorian semi, be careful because even the plumbing could be older than older than most living people. So there you go. Oh, there you go. There's a joke there that I've made there. Let me make this bigger because otherwise you can't see very well. So let's talk about a few parts of houses. Now, yeah, of course, you have the living room, Some people refer to it as the lounge. Others will refer to it as the drawing room. Drawing room's a bit more. It sounds a bit more like you're trying to be too formal, potentially. Uh, Living room is the most common one, but lounge does get used, although that technically that may be more American, but it gets used. And then you have the kitchen, the bathroom, and so on, so on. But we're and the bedrooms as well. But we're going to go into more specific vocabulary than that. The hallway is the corridor you enter. The corridor you enter on the downstairs. So there's like a little corridor which leads into other rooms. Some houses don't have them, but quite a few houses. You enter the house and you walk through. Um, I believe there's quite a lot of Georgian properties in Bath. I believe, yes. I'm not an architecture expert, Isabel. I believe there's quite a few Victorian houses in Bath as well. But I think that famous area, I'd have to check, but I believe it may be Georgian. The one I'm thinking of. Hopefully, you're thinking of the same one. Otherwise, that's crazy. But a hallway is usually downstairs. As I said, they're usually wider in Edwardian properties. Quite a few properties of that era. I have a friend who had a Edwardian property, and he said the hallway was magnificent. He has a magnificent hallway. You look into the house, you're like, wow, this is so grandiose. But the rooms themselves were quite small because the hallway was more important. But it's the corridor you enter on the downstairs. It was kind of very showy. Does anybody know what the landing is? What is the landing? Ah, very nice. Does anybody know what the landing is? I'm gonna test you now. Anybody tell me? Yeah, it's the at the top of the stairs. There's a space at the top of the stairs. It's like a hallway. The hallway is downstairs and the landing is upstairs. So it's the upstairs hallway, if you like, the upstairs corridor. The loft is the space under the roof. Some properties have big lofts, others don't have much space up there. The Americans call that an attic. We say loft. It's not quite a staircase. Flat, yes, I'd say flat. So it's not quite the staircase, it's the part at the top of the staircase. So when you get upstairs and you walk around and there's a little corridor again, it's that area there, the landing. A conservatory is a glass extension used as a kind of sunroom or garden room. It's usually an extension that people buy and kind of sit in to warm themselves or enjoy the sun. A utility room is not all houses have them, but some do. They're usually off the kitchen, and it's where you keep the washing machine and the cleaning supplies and the dryer. Dryers are really important in the UK. You can ask my wife. A box room is a very small room, often used for storage. So, for example, a lot of bedrooms. So some houses they say they're 3 beds, but they're usually 2 and a box room, which is small. It's big enough for a small bed, but potentially it's more used for storage. An ensuite is a bathroom connected directly to a bedroom. So we usually have the main bedroom, which is called the master bedroom, and quite commonly it has an ensuite, which is its own bathroom. Your front garden, your back garden are basically what the Americans would call yard. So it's a lot of homes in the UK will have a front garden, even more will have a back garden. And during certain periods of time that we're not going to mention because YouTube will ban us, they people really wanted a garden. And a patio is an outdoor area with stone slabs used for sitting or eating. So that's basically my new house. No, it's not. So yeah, basically that's a lot of vocabulary and related. In a camping, what do you mean in a camping, ma belle? In a camping, yeah, a utility room is a laundry room, but it also contains a kind of too big. There we go. Um, a laundry room is yeah, it could be done for the laundry, but the utility room could also have the dishwasher in it and stuff like that. So it's all your kind of technological stuff that does the cleaning that maybe you don't want to have in the main kitchen. So it can be the noisier stuff as well. The boiler could be in there as well. The boiler is the thing that heats the water for the house. So when you finally decide to buy a house in the UK or even rent a house, we need to go to the estate agent. The estate agent is the person or a company, can refer to both, who markets and sells houses. Some of them only do sales. Some of them do also do let. They let houses as well. We'll talk about that. Uh, yeah, a seller. They're not as common in the UK. I think Victorian houses tend to have them. Some houses, especially if they're like old police stations, quite commonly in the UK. Well, not commonly, but sometimes you find a house that was like the local police station, but it's not a proper police station. It was like a police house where one policeman would live in a village or town, and they have like a cellar underneath where actually there are prison cells, what used to be prison cells, but they're not as common cellars and other than outside of Victorian houses, possibly because of damp. So your estate agent is the person that shows you houses and sells your house for you. We also they tend to put houses on property websites. Two of the biggest websites that we have here are Zoopla, but Rightmove. And I'm going to tell you now, Rightmove. Oh my god, Rightmove. Everybody seems to have Rightmove, even if they're not moving house. British people, in general, in my experience, love Rightmove. They've all got Rightmove. They're looking at all the time at houses. I wonder how much that is. It's like a kind of curiosity thing. They want to see how much houses are worth in the area, what's for sale, even though they have no intention of moving. I don't know why. It's a British hobby. Now we are moving house. God. People just say, oh, whereabouts? And we give them a rough idea. Maybe a part of the town or a road, and they go, oh, I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. It's really nice. I like what they've done. And you're like, bloody hell. People already know our house that we're buying before we've even moved. But I think it's kind of lovely. It's kind of sweet. But Rightmove is a really, really common hobby in Britain. Everybody's on it. I actually did a little survey of all my friends, and pretty much I think all bar one or two out of about 12 or 13 people had Rightmove on their phone. And nobody was moving. But there you go. So anyway, you go and have a look at houses with the estate agent. Let's make this bigger. And eventually you maybe find a house that you really, really like. And then you make an offer for the house. So you can make an offer or to offer. It can be a verb or a noun. And it's the price you tell the seller that you're willing to pay. So potentially you offer a price lower than what they want. And the asking price is the price that the seller hopes to get. So maybe the seller wants £1 million and you offer 900,000. That's not how much I'm paying. I'm staying on the Isle of Wight. In fact, I'm staying pretty much in the same neighborhood, just a different house. So they're asking price, and then you make an offer. And once the offer gets accepted, you start involving solicitors. Solicitors are the legal professional who handle all the contracts and the paperwork, and they are basically lawyers, but that's what we call them. We call them solicitors. So you need a solicitor to buy a property. So that they handle the legal side of it, and they agree with all the everything, and they deal with the buyers and the sellers and the so on and so on. A surveyor is the person who checks the problems for the property for problems before you buy. So they go to the house and they have a look. Are the walls okay? Is the roof okay? Is the garden okay? What is the damage to the property? How much of this? And they look at every individual problem that potentially the house has. Your mortgage is the loan you get from a bank to buy the house. Now, technically, before you go viewing a property, you should speak to a mortgage lender to get a decision in principle. So you tell them, I earn this much, I want this much, I need this much. And if they say potentially yes, we can lend you that. Then you can go and make offers on houses. And then when you've made an offer, you have to go back to the mortgage lender to get your mortgage offer. So a decision in principle is not an offer. So this is how it works. You eventually arrange the mortgage and so on, so on. And usually you'll have to put a deposit down for the house as well. So usually a deposit can be anywhere between 5, 20% upwards. So if your house is £1 million, you maybe have a deposit of £200,000, and the mortgage company gives you, the bank gives you 80% that you have to pay back. The solicitor handles all of that. The solicitors are, they do all the paperwork, they do all the signing, they do all the registrations, they do everything, which is why they cost money to do that. And finally, when you've bought this house, you have to pay a tax called stamp duty. So on houses of a certain price or more, you have to pay an extra tax. So potentially, if your property was £1 million, my property is not £1 million, but I don't know why I keep saying it. You might have to pay 20, 30, 40,000 pounds more. I don't know, and that's a tax on top of the price that you pay. So you need to budget for that as well. Conveyancing is the legal process of transferring ownership, but we need to talk about freehold and leasehold. A freehold property, you own the house and the land. So the ground is yours and the land, the property, all of it is yours. But leasehold in the UK, usually a little bit cheaper. You own the building, but not the land. And you usually own the property for a set number of years. And technically, after that, somebody can take your house for free. But usually they extend the lease on a leasehold property. And also these leases usually are like 1,000 years or 99 years or 200 years, something like this. So realistically, you're not going to worry about it. You know, if I bought a leasehold property and it said 200 years, I'm like, I'm fine. I'm okay. That's somebody else's problem. So a leasehold property, but they're usually slightly cheaper because you don't own the land. So a lot of people prefer to buy, if they can afford it, they prefer to buy freehold. So they know that the land and everything is theirs. Leasehold, you also have to pay a small amount of money every year to the owner of the land. But it's usually quite small. It's quite, it's a tiny amount of money. But now let's talk about the chain. I've written the famous chain, but I should have probably written the infamous chain. The infamous chain. Does anybody know what the chain is? This is something that's very British. I mean, other countries possibly have them as well. But does anybody know what the chain is? The chain. It's like that sound, isn't it? The metal chain. Does anybody know what the chain is? You can be in the chain. You can. There can be a big chain, a small chain. Anybody know? You could be no chain, which is what most people would like. Does anybody know what the chain is? The infamous, terrifying, horrible chain. Arguably one of the most stressful parts of English property buying. Anybody going to tell me? Going to sit here? I'll tell you in a minute if nobody's got any idea. Descansillo. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. So the chain refers to the sequence of buyers. Yes, when you are buying the owner has to sell his house first or her house first. So effectively, we are in the chain. Somebody is buying our house. We are buying somebody else's house. They are buying somebody else's house, and they are buying somebody else's house. So, like, this is potentially what happens. You have 5 or 6 houses in a chain. So, when the person agrees to buy my house, I can buy that house, they can buy that house, and they can buy that house, and the person can buy their house from them. So maybe somebody's buying the person's house who's buying my house, and it's like a series of chains, and everybody moves on the same day. That's quite dramatic. So effectively, when the solicitor agrees that the person can buy my house, then I'm like, yep, good to go. I can buy that house, and everybody moves on the same day. It is quite a dramatic day. Everybody's like, go, 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 go. It's like the chain is moving. Oh my goodness, the train. Now, sometimes what happens is one person pulls out or stops buying or doesn't want to buy anymore, and the chain collapses, which is awful. Because it's one of the biggest stress factors. So if somebody in the chain decides they don't want to sell anymore, the whole chain gets stuck because suddenly there's something not moving. So in other parts of the UK, even, it is legally binding. Once you say, I will buy it, that's it. But in the UK, it's not legally binding until after exchange of contracts. So exchange of contracts is where you basically sign and agree to basically it's like the exchange of contracts is where you sign and your solicitor says sign here and you agree everything. And once those contracts are exchanged, that is it. You have to buy that house. But before that, in England, it is not legally binding. And completion day is the day you finally get the keys. And usually, because of all the stress and the panic, on completion day, it's tradition for some people to take a photo outside. And everyone's like, yeah, this is our new home. Even if it's absolutely chaotic, boxes everywhere, people moving stuff in. People are like, oh, we've moved the house. Look at us. Send it to your friends and family. Oh, gosh. That day, it feels like a lifetime away at the moment, but hopefully it will be soon. We don't normally say bungalow in camping. It would be like a cabin or a tent. A tent is usually that. Bungalows refer to a specific type of house for us. So in the UK, the chain, it can take 3 to 4 months to move a house. And then suddenly it starts to speed up and you're like, oh my goodness, the chain's moving. But if somebody pulls out at the last minute, it can be really, really depressing. It can be really stressful. Because then everybody has to decide, do they want to stay? Do they want to wait? It can be quite disheartening. Hopefully that doesn't happen to us. Fingers crossed. So I just wanted to quickly talk about hire, rent, and let. Hire in the UK, it's much more of the Americans use it, but it's more common in British English. Hire is when we pay a sum of money in order to use something for a short period of time. So you can hire a car for the day, or you could hire a bike. The Americans tend to use the word rent more than hire if it's short. So usually, if it's a longer period of time, though, for both British and American, we say rent. So the Americans tend to use rent for both, but we tend to use hire when it's shorter, for like a day or an hour. I wouldn't rent a bike for an hour. Sounds a bit odd. Although, again, language changes and language comes in, so some people may. So usually you'd hire a car for the weekend and you'd rent a house. So rent is when we pay to use something for a long period of time. So maybe, for example, you need to drill the wall, and I can, you can hire a drill for the day. Usually, we'd say a seller. Usually, but basement creeps in as well. But it's yeah. So anyway, hire is shorter, rent is longer, but the Americans tend to use rent for both. Hire out is when somebody lends you that for money, if you like. So you go to a company and they hire out the car for the day, and we hire it, and they hire out. Rent out is similar. So, for example, you could rent a house and they rent it out to you. So, for example, I want to use that person's house for a year. I rent the house, they rent it out to me. However, there is a better word for that, and that is let. Let. So if you rent, uh, technically, if you rent a house from somebody, they let it to you, which is why we have sales agents and we have letting agents. Uh, but rent is becoming a more common word for both rent and let, sadly to say. Language changes. But technically, if I pay you to use your house, I rent the house, you let the house. Let is more common in British English than American English. Usually they all say rent and rent out. But we do also, we're not immune to that. So the owner of the house will let the house, and I will rent the house from the owner or the company. So that's the general difference here. Oh, these are really tiny, aren't they? Let's get that there. So the owner of the house is called the landlord or landlady. It's a bit of an old word. Um, it's a bit of an old-fashioned word, landlord, landlady. Most people say property owner now, but landlord was for men, landlady was for women. The person who owns the property, the tenant, is the person renting it. So you rent it from the landlord. The landlord lets it to you. The letting agent is the person who manages rentals. A tenancy agreement is a rental contract. Does anybody know what a notice period is? I'll tell you about the deposit protection scheme as well. It basically, when you rent a house in the UK, you have to pay an amount of money, like 1 month of the rent deposit, and that gets put into a separate account, which is protected from you and from the landlord or landlady. And at the end, no, the tenant is the person who rents the property. So the landlord owns the property. The tenant is living in the landlord's property, which is why we have a tenancy agreement, which is a rental contract, basically. You're welcome, Grazia. The notice period. Your notice period, you can use this for work or you could also use this for a house. It's basically a period of time that you need to tell your landlord that you're leaving. So usually you'll have a 1 month notice period or a 2 month notice period. You quite commonly have a break clause, which means halfway through, you can just say, I'm leaving. Now, one thing I found in Brazil was quite commonly the rental contracts, the tenancy agreements were quite long. I think there were 3 years. Whereas in the UK, a year is more common. A year and sometimes short rentals, short lets, we call them. As well, you can get like month by month, but quite commonly 1 year is the length of the rental or the tenancy agreement. References are previous landlords or employers who say, yeah, you're good, you're a good person. A guarantor is a person who promises to pay the rent if you can't. So quite commonly it's parents. So if you don't have references, you might need a guarantor. Council tax is a local tax paid by residents. A lot of people don't like this. To fund public services. And utility bills are your water, gas, electric, and so on. Let's do some. Let's move on to some wonderful little idioms. There's lots of vocabulary we can do, but I can see that the time. Property owner. Dominion? It's not a common word we'd use. It sounds more like a noun as well. Um, do you mean dominion? But that's not a common word we'd use either. Landlord, landlady, commonly now property owner. Or you could have the uh, it's just property owner is more common. So we've got some wonderful idioms here that we could use. What does get on like a house on fire mean? Get on like a house on fire. Doesn't sound very positive, does it? If you get on like a house on fire with somebody, if you get on like a house on fire, what does that mean? My friend and I, we get on like a house on fire. Look at the kids, they're getting on like a house on fire. What does get on like a house on fire mean? Doesn't sound very positive, does it? Yes, it means that they're getting on very well. They've got a really strong friendship. They have a good time together and they enjoy each other's company. But I always think it doesn't sound very positive, but it is. Oh, those two, they get on like a house on fire. You may also hear the preposition get along. Get along like a house on fire. Make yourself at home is when I invite you into my house and I'm trying to tell you to feel comfortable. Oh, you must feel comfortable. Now, I've spent some time in America, and in America, it's more common if you say like make yourself at home. They'll maybe go to your fridge and grab a drink and things like this. And I've seen it. It's not the most common, and I don't know whether it's just my experience. But in Britain, when we say make yourself at home, even then when we're saying you should feel free to act like you would in your own home, to a certain extent. So maybe if you're babysitting for my son, and I said, look, just make yourself at home. Yeah, I won't mind you taking a drink and stuff like this, and to a certain extent. But if I'm still in the house and I say, oh, just make yourself at home, I would still imagine that you're going to ask if you can have a drink. So culturally, this is quite loaded. Oh, make yourself at home. It doesn't necessarily mean while we're saying sort of act like you'll be yourself, relax, it's all right. We still expect you to sort of maintain etiquette or observe etiquette. A home away from home. A home away from home. A lot of people talk about this during our holidays and things like this. This is a place where you feel really comfortable. And it's like saying, I feel like it's my house. I feel as comfortable here as I do in my own house. Now, it could be a bit of an exaggeration. It can also be used to mean that somewhere that we know really well. Oh, yes. Oh, it's a home from home. It's a home away from home. Um, just to say we're so familiar with it, we feel really comfortable there. That kind of idea. So I'm trying to think if there's a home away from home for us. Not really. I think we're some people do. Some people feel more comfortable. Maybe they go to a hotel pretty regularly. We tend to go to different places, so we don't get too attached. But people that go to the same place over and over and over again, year after year, might say, "Oh, it's a home away from home," or "a home from home." I deleted that one. As safe as houses. As safe as houses. What does this one mean? Any ideas? If I say it's as safe as houses, I'll give you a clue. We quite commonly use this with finance and money, investments. It's a financial related idiom. So we're still using the word home, but it is a financial idiom. As safe as houses, not so much. Not a shelter. So if I say something is as safe as houses, it basically means it's incredibly safe and secure, but we usually use it to talk about finance. So I might say, exactly, Cloud Enter. So I might say, oh yeah, invest in that company. It's as safe as houses. I invested in a solid company with good prospects, so I feel my financial future is as safe as houses. It's the idea that investing in property is the safest thing to do. So it's like, yeah, it's secure, but it's you could say, oh, the stock market is it good? Yeah, is that property only good? Yeah, yeah, it's as safe as houses, mate. So it's basically saying there is no risk. Absolutely brilliant. On the house is something that we all want to hear. On the house means it is given for free by the establishment. So it's quite common in a restaurant, in a pub, venue, things like this. So, for example, you go to a restaurant and they say, "Oh, dessert is on the house." A complimentary drink. Quite commonly, this happens as a thank you, a celebration for something like a birthday. So, for example, yes, it's when they give something for the. So, for example, maybe you go for your birthday at a pub and they give you a drink on the house. It's like from the owner of the business. So if somebody says, "Oh, you've been," somebody repeat, that home from home uh thing. Somebody stays in a hotel for 20 times. You could say, "Oh, we'd like to offer you a bottle of wine on the house to say thank you for staying with us." Uh, so you might also hear somebody say compliments of the house, but it's more common on the house, and it's quite commonly used for an apology for a mistake. So maybe if somebody forgets your order and they say, "Would you like dessert on the house? Would you like a?" Sometimes they'll say, "Would you like a drink?" as a way of saying sorry. Would you like a drink on the house? But on the house basically means free, and it's often used as an apology to say, "We're really sorry, we screwed up. Would you like a free drink?" You can. I'm actually thinking of a real story right now, but I'm not going to tell you that right now because I want to talk about bring the house down. Bring the house down. Another one that doesn't sound very good. What does bring the house down mean? What does bring the house down mean? It doesn't sound very good at all, does it? Is this one good or bad? Is it positive or negative? Oh, there we go. Oof. Is it good or bad? Maybe I could say the last band's performance really brought the house down. So it's quite commonly used in musical performances or comedy. It is positive. It's actually positive. Actually positive. Yeah, it could be to bring create a huge laugh. But it's quite commonly used to talk about music or a performance, which is such an amazing performance, such an amazing show that the audience claps and cheers and makes a massive amount of noise. Wow, that last comedian really brought the house down. That last band really brought the house down. So it's basically saying it was it's not about having fun. It's more about saying the performance itself was amazing. So yeah, at the end, yes, the idea is somebody else will have fun, but that's not what the expression is saying. We don't say, "Oh, they brought the house down. They had fun." It's two separate ideas. They're linked, but they're two separate ideas. To bring the house down means to perform so amazingly, it creates an amazing atmosphere. Les Miserables. Les Miserables. I love Les Mis, as we say, the musical theatre piece, and always at the end, some of the performances they just bring the house down. It's just incredible. Um, I love it. It's my guilty thing. A homebody is somebody who prefers to stay at home rather than go out. As I get older, I'm becoming more of a homebody. So a homebody is somebody who just doesn't like leaving the house, basically. So let me know if you're a homebody. Oh, there's some missing on these pages. Um, Let me know if you're a homebody or you like going out. Are you extrovert or more introverted? Um, the home is where the heart is, or home is where the heart is. Basically means uh, it's the place where you feel happiest. And a homebody will always say, home is where the heart is. But you can call anything home. You could say a person is your home, technically. Some people, it's a bit of an awkward one, really. People say, well, home is where the heart is. And wherever you are, that's where I feel at home. So this idea of home isn't necessarily about buildings. It's a feeling. So the next one is home sweet home. And there's a bit more information here. This basically means I'm happy to be home. Oh God, I'm home sweet home. This is something we say usually after we go on holiday. British people are famous for like really wanting to go away on holiday, and when they go home, they're like, "Oh, I need a holiday from the holiday." Oh, home sweet home. Thank goodness I'm home. Quite commonly, you see a mat on the floor. Home sweet home. Yes, some people do feel like that. I prefer a good bed. You're pessimistic, really, so you don't like leaving the house. Um, in the doghouse, I love this one. Ah, this is not something you want. You do not want to be in the doghouse. This relates to your relationship. If you are in the doghouse, you are in trouble with your partner, your husband, your wife, whatever, for something you have done or for something you have not done. If you forget your wife's birthday, your husband's birthday, you will be in the doghouse. Now, you don't literally sleep in the dog's house, but it's like saying, you're so much trouble, you're sleeping outside tonight. It's this idea that I love dog idioms, but it's like saying basically you are in trouble. You're in the doghouse. Quite commonly, you get people going down the pub. You're right, mate. No, I'm in the doghouse. Oh, my wife's furious with me. I know it's a bit of a stereotype. This kind of conversation that happens. Um, that one should say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and this means you should be careful about criticizing people when it could be quite hypocritically applied to yourself as well. So if I'm like, oh no, like she's not perfect. No, no, she's not perfect at all, mate. People in houses shouldn't throw stones. You're not perfect either. So it's like saying, don't be hypocritical. And a lot of people just say people in glass houses, mate. People in glass houses. Couple more. Powerhouse sounds really good, doesn't it? But it's usually referred to as an organization. And it's an organization that possesses great strength or influence. We call it a powerhouse. So, for example, Apple is a powerhouse in the mobile phone industry, or Google is a powerhouse. So it's a very powerful and influential company. We can use it to a lesser extent for a person. He's a bit of a powerhouse. More commonly used for businesses, though. And finally, we have a front of house. This one refers to the theatre, much like Bring the House Down. The front of house refers to the front part of a theatre, the part that the public sees. The box office where you buy your tickets, the lobby, the sort of area in front, the bar, and so on. So usually people say, please be in the front of house area before the show, this kind of things. Or there's a bar in the front of house area. Although you also hear this referring to people, the front of house staff. Thank you to all the front of house staff or the front of house for all their hard work. So some people will say, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to thank the performers, the stage crew, and the front of house for all their hard work. But we don't only use it to refer to theatres, which is why I've said it's an idiom on this list. You may also hear this term referring to customer-facing parts of other businesses, such as the reception desk in a hotel or the waiting staff in a restaurant. We call the waiting staff in a restaurant the front of house. So I will talk a little bit more about this, but that's the full picture of moving house in the UK. The homes, the process, and the culture behind it. If you've got any questions about it, let me know. and I will answer them. But if you've ever moved to another country, you'll know that home isn't just a building, it's how you feel in that place. And learning the local language, even these little cultural words, it helps you truly belong. If you enjoyed this lesson, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, all about British English, British culture, and real life English. And if you're keen on learning more, from cultural fluency to pronunciation, check out the British English Lesson Library link. There is a link on one of the videos, and I will write the link down below in the description. Now, please do remember that my wife and I, we are moving, so wish us luck with the next move. And may your next move come with fewer boxes and far more happiness and biscuits. From me today, I just want to say thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for spending your time with me on this Thursday evening, and I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.